All right, good morning. Again, this is Luis. I'm with the customer success team at My Customers. And for today, we're going to be talking about how to best use activities, especially given the pandemic that's going on today. So with today's topic, we're going to go over a few things, some basic, how-tos of how to actually use activities and to start taking benefit of it right away with what we already offer. But then we're going to go into some more specific scenarios as far as given what's going on in the world today, how can activities actually be used to start planning out so that whenever we can hit the field and hit the road again, you as a sales rep are prepared and ready to be able to actually hit the road and have a specific strategy in place. So right now, since everyone's really stuck at home, it's a really good time to be able to reflect, look back and see what you've done in the past, understand what's been successful, and then build strategies off of that. So within today's conversation, we're going to cover some basic how-tos and then get into some more specific as to how to plan better for the future while using the Map My Customer feature that we call activities. And for those of you who don't know, activities is really just the way that you log what you've done out in the field or what you've done when talking to clients. So you can imagine an activity being the equivalent to a sales call, a phone call, an email, different types of touch points that can all be customized, and we'll be going through that today. And I do see that in the participants today, we have several newer people that have recently been onboarded with My Customers. So we'll definitely go through some of the basics as far as how to use activities and what it's really been used for. But if people have more questions, please feel free to shoot them our way. We'll take questions as we're going. And for those of you that are already somewhat savvy with My Customers and are looking for some more advanced tips and tricks, just bear with us. The first 15 minutes, we'll cover the basics. And then after that, we'll get into some more of those specific tips and tricks. So to start out, I actually do want to jump into the mobile app so that you all can see what it looks like on the phone to log and create activities, how to log a sales call while you're out on the road. That is one of the fundamentals of the activities feature in Map My Customers. And even for those of you that are actually have been using Map My Customers for a while, this might be helpful because activities is actually something that got an entire facelift in the new mobile application. So I'm gonna start with that, and I'll share my screen right now. Just bear with me here while it's connecting. All right. So you should all be looking at the Map My Customers mobile app. For some people, if you haven't been on here in a little while, this might look entirely different. For some people that have been on here in the past couple of weeks, this is exactly what you've been working with in the past few weeks. Now, what we were talking about is actually logging sales calls and logging activities with specific clients. So you can do it in two places whenever you want to log a sales call. You can just do it from this page and click where it says add activity, and it'll take you to the place to where you would go in and actually fill out this form of sorts that you can actually type in the information like this is what we talked about, this is the date that it happened, and this is what happened at that entire meeting. And what you can also do is search or just pull up the specific company, right? Say that you specifically met with Smith Thomas, and I want to log my sales call. You would just click on Smith Thomas. It will pull up this profile of you, like this is information about Smith Thomas. Now I'm gonna add an activity. And one thing to note, bit of confusing word, one important thing to be aware of, adding an activity and adding a note are two separate things. They're two separate functions. So if you're more focused around logging sales calls, tracking sales calls, you're always going to focus on adding activity. So from a best practice standpoint, I would always just recommend really practice activities more than notes. We'll click on that. And now this is where, for some of you older, users, this is going to look very different than what you've been used to. But this is the new activity form. It's pretty straightforward from what you can tell here, and it's really simple and intuitive to use. So in the activity title, you can see that it says visit. Just think of the activity title like a subject line to an email. Like, what did you actually talk about in that meeting? What was it about? Was it a purchasing conversation? Was it a first, visit? Was it an introduction? Like we talked about this specific thing. We talked about Bob's kid and how well he's playing in Little League. You can do some rules, overview summaries of what you talked about in the title itself. Complete. So this is really important to note. Whenever you create an activity on the mobile app, it's going to be automatically complete. So this means that like, hey, you did this thing, great job. That's why it has the check mark next to it, and it tells you this is complete. This is really important because on the web app, this does not look the same way. The idea being that when you're on your phone out on the road, you're doing things, visiting clients. So by default, this will always default to being marked as complete, as in this person did this thing. If you wanted to mark something as incomplete, like, hey, I want to do this in the future, or I did not get to do this thing, what you would do is just click on this button that says complete, and it would just fade out to where it's now white rather than a darker gray. And it tells you like, okay, next time you come here, you can mark it as complete. So it's a really important toggle to be aware of. This is not done versus this is actually done. The button to the right is where it says make public. This is also a newer feature that we've talked about real briefly, but what this is referring to is what we call public activities. Public activities are used whenever you want your entire team or a specific person on your team to have access to this specific note. And this is more relevant when it's, say, you have two sales reps covering the same territory. They may overlap, so you want them to be able to see each other's notes. So at that point, what you would do is you would toggle this as public, and now both sales reps in the territory would see that note. Where this is not as relevant is whenever you have really defined territories that people don't go out of bounds in, so they don't need to actually collaborate around specific accounts. And if you're an admin or a manager, you will automatically see your sales reps' activities, so you don't need to worry about training your reps on this. So by default, this is set up to private. Sorry, this is set up to being private, and then when I toggle this on, now it's set up to being public. Now the next thing we go into here is the activity types. So this is where it gets to be really interesting and useful depending on how your business operates. Activity types are just, as it sounds, the different things that you're doing out in the field. Are we doing product drop-offs? As a company, is it really important for us to know how many product drop-offs do we do on a weekly basis? Is it really important for us to know how many demos we're doing on a weekly basis? I mean, heck, if we're, a cold calling team, we're a hunting team, we do want to track how many cold calls we do versus like an in-person visit where you might visit an existing client or a further along meeting with a prospect. So activity types can really track different types of touch points. And you can even get into where you can manually log some phone calls, lunch and learns, etc. All right. So going through this, and I see a quick message here from Todd Wright. So Todd, it sounds like there's a specific issue when in respect to activity types on your side. So I would ask that anybody that has a specific issue they're running into, to please reach out to our support team. I will show you actually right now. I will take a step back for you to know that, and this is a bit of a hijacking the webinar. But I want you to know that our support team is readily available for you whenever you need to reach out with questions. So what you can do is you can click on this blue icon on the top left, this logo. And then when you go scroll down, there's an option here that says get help. So if you click get help, this will actually bring you up to your entire, to our support team. So you can go ahead and start a new conversation here and talk with one of our lovely support reps. They are live and they're there to help you out. So if you're running into a specific issue, please reach out to our support team right here and they'll be able to jump in and help you out right away. So thank you for asking that question, Todd. And I think this, if you reach out to our support team, they'll be really great in helping you out. And if anybody else has issues like this, just so you know, our support team is available on the mobile app as well as the web app. So now I'll just real quickly jump back into the activity section. Within activity types, this brings you to a drop-down list of the different types you have set up. I'll show you how you can create new activity types on the web app as an admin or manager. This is a really useful function to have to be able to customize what your sales reps can actually log as having done out in the field. Next, you have the notes section. And this is why it's important to differentiate between the note that we have back here. Add a note is not the same thing as adding a note in the activity section. This is an activity note. So if you actually want to associate, I made this sales call and this is what we talked about, this is the workflow you go through. This is where you add the activity with the activity type and the note. So you can actually talk about, what this is what we talked about last time. And one of the great things about Map My Customers and how it really is, pretty intuitive, mobile based, is the fact that we have a speech to text option. So we can work directly with Siri, especially for these iPhone users. And I know people always love this. This is a crowd favorite, but just being able to talk into the application. Had a great first visit. I'll come back next week. And then just from there, you can go ahead and talk into the application and leave a note for it. And then once you're done, you would move on. And then as we continue to scroll down, the assign to section, this is actually, who is assigned this activity, who did this thing or who do we expect to do this thing. So this can be useful because as an admin or a manager, I can come in and assign activities to other team members if you have them. As a sales rep, you're out in the field, this will automatically be assigned to you so that you get credit for the work that you're doing out in the field. The due date and the due time is really important. This is where you can specify like, hey, we did this thing today. So by default, whenever you create the add activity button, this date and time will always update based on when you clicked on that button. And if you want to plan for the future, you can just click on the blue text and then change the date and time for the future. Or for the past, if you want to go ahead and backdate information, that's perfectly fine as well. And we'll go into planning for future versus past when we start looking into what can we do during the pandemic we're dealing with today to plan for the future and be prepared for once we can actually hit the road. The duration here will actually let you specify like, hey, I was at this meeting for an hour, so I might do 60 minutes. I was at this meeting just for 30 minutes. So you can actually specify how long specific meetings took. And where this ends up being helpful is when we switch over to the website application, is looking at a calendar view to kind of getting an idea of how long it's taking you to do certain things. And next we go into what I call some of the associations. And that's really, I think a really simple way to think of that, right? We're logging this call, we're saying we did this thing, but what does this thing relate to? What does it get associated to? So this thing relates to the specific company. I added an activity before with Landmark Dentistry, and I click Add Activity. And here you can see that Landmark Dentistry is auto-populated in the company section. If you have any contacts at Landmark Dentistry that you also want to associate with this, you would be able to find those contacts, or what we call those people or that person, directly here. Same with the deal. So this association can be really helpful if you want to measure more specific things. If you are using deals in Map My Customers to prospect and hunt for new business, you'll be able to actually measure how many activities are associated with this specific sales opportunity, this specific new deal. How often are we engaging with this person? So if you really want to get a little bit deeper into the weeds of that kind of information, that's a great way to use it. If you want to be really, simple and get enough value out of activities to where it can be really helpful to you, I would just keep it super simple. If you're working at the company level, just add the activity at the company and it'll get associated directly to that company. If you add an activity to a deal, it'll automatically link back up. So you can always think of this relationship or this association hierarchy as linking back up. If a deal has a company that it's associated to, when you add the activity, it'll tie back up to the company. If a person or a contact works for a business that you have associated that way in Map My Customers, when you add the activity, that activity will get linked back up to the company. So that's really important to note that whenever you're doing things at the lower level, let's say, of a person or a deal, it can connect back to the company level so that you can always measure what's happening with this company, with this account as a whole. And then lastly, we have a custom field section right here. And this is something that you set up as well on the web app, but this is where you can actually put specific fields of information. Maybe you have a section called next steps, and then you type into it, this is a text box, but you can also do drop downs. If the custom field says next steps, maybe one option is, nobody was there, nobody was there. Or the next step is, demo booked or demo performed. You can really specify and customize this to what you want to do with it. So a really good question from the audience that just came in from Jeff. Jeff was asking, does the activities always default to completed? And that's a good question, Jeff. The activity does always default to completed on the mobile app. On the web app, it's a little bit different, but just really important to know that whenever you're making new activities on the Map My Customers mobile app, it does default to complete. So let's run through one scenario, right? I want to say that I visited Landmark Dentistry. Great, I visited. I'm gonna click save because I did this thing. But now I want to tell the system I was told to come back in 2 weeks. So what I'm going to do is I might go to the due date and due time, change the date for, let's just say 1 week, Thursday, April 23rd at the same time. And I'm going to click where it says complete to make it so that now it says mark completed. This means that now this thing hasn't been done yet, and I'm planning for this in the future based on the fact that I have a future date, and I also have this concept of now this hasn't been done yet. And I'll add a note, have to come back next week, and then we'll save it. And then whenever you make these activities, you can actually see those on the activities list on the page that we're on right here, right? So whenever we pull up a company on Map My Customers, it'll by default just show you what you recently did there. Recently, we had 2 visits, and it shows you the one that's furthest out or the most recent on here, furthest out in the future. So the one in the future for April 23rd is a default, but it also shows me the one I had before that on April 16th, being today. Okay, so I am going to shift over to the web application. I do want to give around 10-15 seconds for people to throw in any questions they might have around the mobile app in respect to activities. So one really good question from Kevin. He was asking, you made a really good point. Everyone is working from home today, and people are doing a lot more email-based activities, and there is no way to really log these automatically into Map My Customers. So this is a common question we do get, Kevin, and our product and development team is fully aware of this. But if you're adding any emails, for example, that you're sending out from your Outlook or your Gmail, you will have to log those separately if you want to track that kind of activity as the activity type email, which we don't have in this case, but if you had an email activity type, you would track it like this. So another good question from Jeff, and this is actually something that I'll show you right now. Can you put a reminder on a calendar that will notify you? So the way that we work with notifications from activities is that we can offer the calendar sync. So if we click on this gear icon, there's an option under settings to take you to the calendar sync option. And from calendar sync, it'll say start syncing. And then this will take you to a browser where you can type in your email address. And from that point, it'll let you choose like, hey, Map My Customers, we offer the Outlook calendar integration as well as a Gmail calendar integration. So depending on what your email is, it'll direct you to that. And then whenever you're making new activities in Map My Customers, it'll sync back to that calendar you have it connected to. And then you can get the notifications from the calendar that you're working with. So Gmail will, for example, send you a notification when you have an activity coming up. Same with Outlook. Yep, happy to. And Jeff just asked to do it again. So Jeff, right now I am on just any page, right? If you look at the tabs at the bottom here, we have home, maps, routes, records. This gear icon is available on every single page. This is the calendar. This is essentially the settings icon. So if we click on this gear icon, taking you to the settings at the very top, the first option that you'll have is to actually click on this calendar sync, and then it'll say start syncing. So when you click where it says start syncing, it'll just open you up to whatever browser you have on your phone, like Safari in my case, or if you have Google Chrome, it'll take you to Google Chrome. And then you just type in the email address. So make sure that the email address that you're typing in is exactly the same email as what you are using Map My Customers with. So in my case, my email is luis@mapmycustomers.me. That's my Map My Customers account. I'm not going to put in this case, luisdavila612@gmail, which is my personal account. I will always use the same email for the calendar sync as I am using in Map My Customers. All right, we have one more question. Do you do the calendar sync just once and you're good, or do you need to do it multiple times? So that's a really good question and something that we get asked quite a lot. Once you do the calendar sync, it is a one-time setup. So once you set it up for the first time, you don't need to worry about having to do it every single time for every single activity. You just make sure that you set it up at one time, and any new activities you add and update will be then pushed to your calendar. So you don't need to do that over and over and over again for all these activities. But one thing to note, say for example, you have 10 activities in your Map My Customers account, and then you go to set up the calendar sync for the first time, it's not going to pick up those old 10 activities until you update them. So the calendar sync will only work as long as you've created new activities or updated existing activities since after you've actually synced the calendar. So essentially, old activities will not show up unless you update them. All right, it's a really great questions, everybody. I appreciate it. Please keep on bringing these up. I am going to transition now over onto the web app. Now, if anybody has any more questions, you all know how to access our support team as well. I'll show you how you can access them on the computer too, but I will be shifting over. All right, give me one second, everybody. Just getting my screen ready. Fantastic. So from here, what I'm going to jump into is a little bit of basics just on like how, where the activities are and what you can do with it. And then we'll go into some of the more advanced things. So right now we're on the Map My Customers homepage. So when you log in, this is what you get. This is what you see. So then we'll click on where it says plan. This plan dropdown, you have multiple dropdowns here, right? Map, plan, records, manage reports. This is your top navigation bar. To get to your activities, you click on plan and then go to activities. This is a little bit more useful as an admin or a manager, or right now everybody's on the computer trying to get ready for things in the future. This is what you would use. This is what you would do. So from here, we can see the activities that are already set up. So to give you a quick walkthrough, and there's a lot of little things going on here, so just bear with me as we go through this. On the left-hand side are all of the activity types that we had set up. So these might seem familiar because you just saw them on the screen on my mobile app. We have the visit, call, product drop-off, emails here, demo, meeting, cold call. So this is one important thing to highlight. We see email here, but we didn't actually see it on the mobile app. What's up with that? So one of the things you can actually do on Map My Customers is customize to pick and choose what you actually want to see or what you might want to remove. So we actually click, and there we go. We have a couple of other faded ones. This equipment one. If I hover over it, you see these three little dots to the right. This will actually let me choose to edit and change the name of its activity type, reactivate it, aka make it visible. Now it's no longer faded. You can actually see it here. Or just delete it. Say that I want to remove this entire activity type. I don't want to track it anymore. I'll just delete it. So you can actually customize and pick and choose what it is you actually want to see. All right. And staying on this topic of this left-hand activity type section, this is also very useful because if you can see to the left here, there are checkboxes next to the various activity types that you're using. So say, for example, I want to see all of my activities, but I actually want to see just the ones that are tasks. I want show me all of my tasks, right? I have task right here. There's a checkbox next to it. I'll click into that. And that's a great way to filter and show you only the task activity types in your Map My Customers account. So one of the topics I want to talk about today is actually looking back and reflecting, like, what are some of your most used activity types? Or maybe, like when you're looking at some of the most commonly used activity types, so that you have an activity type called just, visited customer. But visited customer, as you're kind of looking and analyzing through things, might in reality mean two different things. You can visit a customer for a routine follow-up or a service call if you're doing, the end-to-end sales cycle like many people are. So you might be doing some sales slash some service slash support, or you can visit a customer to talk about growing their account, finding some upsell opportunities, and really, building that value with the client that you're working with. So while those are both, in-person visits, visiting a customer, they really are responsible for two very different outcomes, right? One is, retaining a client, which is really good as far as, servicing and supporting them. But one is actually adding revenue, and something that as a salesperson, you might want to start prioritizing or just talking with your team about, like, how are we actually breaking down our time? Are we spending most of our time doing service calls? Or are we spending most of our time doing sales calls? And that's just one example. That can open up into several other scenarios where you might break down an activity type that's so broad and general, like visit, and really customize it based on what are the, specific types of things that you're doing out in the field. So if you, in this case, say, like, I am doing a lot of routine service calls, versus sales calls, what I might do is I might click on this three little buttons next to activity types, click where it says add new type, and I'm going to add a new activity type called routine service call. And then I'm going to add a new activity type called growth, like sales growth call. Just as an example, right? This lets you track two very different types of things you're doing out in the field. There can also be different levels of importance to it, depending on what the company's goal and mission is in that moment. So when we're, sitting at home today and really trying to understand how to make the most use of the time, it's a really good time to actually think about the approach that we're taking with working with clients and how we're actually measuring what we're doing. And one of those things we're measuring can be driven through activities, as far as, are we just servicing, just 80 clients versus trying to acquire new ones or grow existing business. So now I have something that tells me, like, I am servicing a client, I am growing an existing client, versus a cold call. Now I am trying to acquire a brand new client. As a sales team, being able to actually identify how many sales calls of these types we're doing, now I have a better idea of, which direction my team is heading. As a sales manager, you can identify what your team is doing more of and be like, hey team, let's, pull the reins back a little bit. Let's pull it back and re-strategize, because we're doing way too many cold calls and we're not doing very well retaining our existing clients. So let's focus on that. Or we should be growing our accounts rather than trying to hunt for some new ones, or just trying to achieve that perfect balance, which is, everyone's trying to go after, and it's really hard to do. But this is a really good way to start trying to pursue those types of balances. All right, so that's with the activity types on the left-hand side. It's really great to be able to customize, pick and choose which activity types you want to see, as well as just actually customize and decide, these are the activities types that I want. This is what's actually useful, and this is what's not. And if you uncheck all of these, by default, it'll show you all of them as well. One other important thing as an admin or manager, if we click on these three little buttons, you can actually reorganize this list. And why reorganizing this list is important is because however you reorganize this on the web app is going to reflect the mobile app of all of your users. So if I want to have let's say our routine service call be the top option, along with our sales growth call, and then our cold call. When I click done here, now whenever you make a new activity on the Map My Customers mobile app, it's going to auto-populate to the routine service calls first, and then the next option below it will be the sales growth call, then cold call, then visit. So just by doing that, I've already configured and customized the experience as a sales rep on the field. This is what I'll see on the phone. Or if you're managing a team of sales reps, this is how you actually customize the things that they can see in the specific order. All right. So now moving away from the left-hand side of the activity types, as you can see on the screen here, you already see all of your activities just, one by one by one, right? Say that I want to go ahead and click into review an activity that I had here before. I could see like, okay, this is the account, this is the company, this is the deal it's with, this is the activity type. This is just what it looks like. And this does look different than the mobile app. So that's important to note. This looks a little bit different, but it has the same features and functionalities here as far as choosing the activity type. You can kind of click through, changing the subject line or the title, date, time, the notes, completed versus not completed, and all the additional information. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close this out. And now we're gonna actually look at these three little drop downs and understand what those mean and what they actually do for you. When you look at all activities, you have four main options, including all activities. By default, when you navigate to this page, and I'll just refresh to make it seem like as if I just got here for the first time. When you navigate to this page, by default, it's going to show you all of your incomplete activities, things that haven't been done. Things that haven't been done means things that could be due in the future or just were never completed. So you have that here. You can toggle it on to show you all of the activities, things not done and things done. Completed activities means, what has my team actually done? And then public activities, what does my team have that's shared amongst all of them? So it's a quick little drop-down filters you can use. All the users is really straightforward. Here you have all of the users that you can toggle through so you can see the view as a viewer of them. And this is more so for larger organizations. But if you have a scenario where you have regional managers or multiple teams in My Customers, where one regional manager oversees 3 people and then another regional manager oversees 4 people, and they're 2 different teams, 2 different territories. If you want to see how the entire team is doing and you're the master admin, you would actually find the regional manager's username here and click in as view as them. Because by viewing as a regional manager, you're also going to see what their sales reps territories look like. So if you have a bit of a more complex sales hierarchies model, that's how you would do it. You would look at things at the regional manager level to be able to see how the entire team is doing. All objects lets you just circle through like, hey, I want to see just the companies, what activities are just with companies, what are just with people, and what are just with deals, for example. And the last one that I personally use quite a lot is this little icon to the right-hand side. This is tucked away, but it's really useful. This lets you actually decide to see like, hey, do you want to sort things based on the created date or the date of the event? So the created date is actually going to show you which activity was most recently created at the very top. So in that sense, it's descending based on the most recent time to the oldest time. Date of the event is, when was the date of this thing actually assigned to? So if we might have created an activity for today, but it's not assigned till be due until next year. So at this point, this will prioritize what is due in the next year versus things created. All right, and then we have a filter option here. This can really helpful as a manager, mainly for one reason that I'm going to show you here in the filter. Is, of course, you can do it based on activity type. You can say like, show me all of the activity types, all of the activities with these types, and you can select multiple. So it's similar to the checklist on the left-hand side. This is just a probably more intuitive way to actually filter based on activity type equals. And then what you can also do, and this is where it can get much more helpful than what we saw before, is you can actually select multiple users on your team to filter by. So say that I want to see activities that I've made, as well as Batman, as well as Natalie. If I want to see just activities that those 3 users have made, I'm going to add this filter, apply this filter, and then we'll see only these, right? So now we only have 888 activities. So the activities filter ends up being a really helpful tool. And when we reset this, we can see that now there's 895. So out of 895, 888 of those activities were created by those 3 users that I selected before. So this filter is actually pretty helpful. So now we'll take a quick pause here just to open up to any questions people might have. And if there's no questions, we'll jump into the Map My Customers calendar view. And we'll just give you a few seconds. No rush if not. We're good on time here, so I want to make sure that we cover everything that you all need. All right. So next we're going to jump into the calendar view. And this can also just be a really helpful view to actually plan by, right? To get an idea of looking back, how much time did I spend on this specific day actually visiting or meeting with clients versus how much time am I spending in the future when I'm planning things out. And the calendar view can be really helpful, especially when planning in the future, because sometimes having the visual of like, hey, this is what my calendar looks like versus this is the list of things I have to do that day can actually give you a sense of how much you have to do in a given day. So when we click on the calendar view, we'll let it load here. You can see that by default, it's showing us what it looks like on the calendar on a monthly basis. And then here it shows you like these are the activities that we have set up with these specific times. Today is the 16th. But now say that I want to look at things on a weekly basis. What does my week by week look like? Then this will look very similar, right? If you use Outlook, Gmail, or any other calendar, you can see that this is the week by week view. So as a sales rep, this is a great way to both look back and reflect, but also look forward and get an idea of like, hey, I'm setting myself up to do all of these things in the future, especially as I'm preparing to go out in the field. And we have such a focus to grow a business given the time we lost. Being able to actually measure how much you have to do in a day from a visual standpoint ends up being really, really helpful. And you can click into the activity itself to pull up the information about it. So you can do this within activities from the monthly basis, a weekly basis, or a daily basis. So let's see if we can actually find an example of a month where we had many activities. Give me 1 second here. You can see that this account does not have as much information as I would have liked, but you can really get the idea. And even if we click the today option right here, it's going to bring us right back to where we are. So I really would recommend people to start using the calendar view. It's really helpful as an individual sales rep. For the sales managers, this is also equally as helpful, if not a little bit more. It's a really great way to kind of toggle through and see like, hey, what does this past week look like for my sales rep A? And then how does it look like for sales rep B? Because you can filter these things based on username. So you can look at these things based on the different users and a week by week basis. All right, so that's really given a pretty in-depth overview of activities. A couple of strategies that I would recommend as we're looking to prepare out into the future. I think everyone tends to have a good idea. A little bit different if you're hunting as much, but even if you're hunting, you might have a good idea of what are the key accounts. Say we have all of our activities set up and everything, but we have a list of key accounts that we need to go after. These might be key accounts because they're huge. They're already existing customers. There might be a certain variable that's making them key accounts. So, step one here really comes down to, if we're talking about building a strategy, let's build some criteria around who we're going to target. So try to identify, what makes a certain business qualify as a key account, so that then we can start using activities to plan for it in the future. So once you have a list of key accounts identified, what I would recommend starting to do is go into the plan option, go to plan groups, and then start using company groups You can use people and deal groups too, but I recommend companies. Grouping is, think of grouping as a way you can build a list. Build a list based on whatever criteria you want. You can hand select what falls into each group. And one of the great things about grouping is that it lets you easily filter and visualize on the map, like, hey, these are the accounts that belong to this specific group, and see just those on the map. Let's say that I want to build an account, a group called Priority 1 post-COVID. And we'll save that right there. Now we started to make a group. These are the Priority 1 accounts that I want to visit as soon as we're able to hit the road. Now what you might start doing is you might go into the records page or a map page, or just search for specific businesses, right? Let's just pull up a business. Let's pull up a couple. We have here test company. Let's look at test company. Let's say that this is like, a Walmart or a Whole Foods, some major company that we want to work with and we want to target them. What I'm going to do is now put them into the groups, manage groups, and we'll look at Priority 1. And then we also have COVID here. Yeah, Priority 1. I had a typo, that's why I couldn't find it. Priority 1 post-COVID. So I'll check off and put this account into this group. So now it's in that group and we can make filters by it. And this is helpful for multiple ways, but I'll show you how it relates to activities in a second. What you can also do is just go through a list like this, right? And you can filter this list out, customize it to however you want to. Start checking off these boxes, just saying like, these are the key accounts that I want to keep track of, especially once everything slows down and I'm able to get out into the road. I'm going to bulk edit these accounts and put them into the group Priority 1 post-COVID. So now with this in mind, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to go to where it says plan groups, go back to the company groups that I had, and now you'll see that there are 10 accounts in that group, 10 companies in that group. I'm going to do one specific thing, and this is a really useful feature that does tie back to groups. This is what we call Cadence. It's in Cadence management. It's a great way to tell my customers as an application, if I don't visit this person, turn the pin color automatically yellow. Turn the pin color automatically a certain color. So it does go from white to red. So if I don't visit this client in 30 days, for example, Cadence, let's say assign a Cadence 30 days, I'll save that. And now the system, whenever 30 days has passed, since you logged an activity, it'll turn those pins from, I believe it was white to red. So right now, everything is still, this is the regular map view of how you would see things in groups. If you click on where it says show Cadence color, this is where it actually takes into consideration and calculates how long has it been since you visited each one of those pins on the map. And from here, it'll show you a white versus red map pin view. Just bear with me here 1 second. The connection's being a little slower than I'd like. All right, it loaded up. So as you can see here, it's showing all of the red pins. So this is showing me like you haven't actually made any activity to these accounts, which is why they're all red. But if you actually started to click on these accounts, and you can see them on the list view below here, if you started clicking on them and adding activities, those pins would turn white. The idea behind this being that you could set up this specific target group and list of accounts to set this cadence with that you want to see them or visit them or call them every 30 days. And you can specify all of that within the application when you have the show cadences. And now what we can start doing is not only do we get a visual of who of our key accounts we haven't actually seen recently, but now you can actually start going down this target list and clicking into each one of these. And again, this is also available on mobile. But you can start going down these filling out information about this business. Maybe you're taking the time to do some research online to know how this business is doing. How is coronavirus impacting this prospect that I want to go after? How is it impacting my key account? Maybe that's a field that you have here in Map My Customers, or that you just put into the notes section. But what you can start doing is creating activities for the future. I want to visit this client or this account, let's say, June 1st, right? I want to have this prepared. So I'm going to start planning out for the future, and I want to do a phone call, of course. Social distancing, it's a real thing. So we'll do a phone call more than anything. And then we made this activity. Now we go back to this list that we had made before. And when we go back to this list, we can go to the next one. We went to test company. Now we go to landmark dentistry. And you can start working down this list and this process and making activities, as you learn more about each business. Let's say that I want to make an activity for July 1st. So the purpose of this is you've made a target list of key accounts. You've prioritized these businesses for whatever reason, under whatever criteria you have. And now with this hit list, you can start just going back and looking back at this list on a weekly basis, monthly basis. Maybe you have 3 different tiers of lists: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, priority A, B, C, however you want to work it. But you can make this list and start planning out for the future by making sure that each one of these accounts actually has an activity prepared for it for the future, so that when you can get out on the road, you can start visiting these clients. Or let's just say that you want to start building a relationship now because everyone's in the office. Well, you can start setting up these activities and seeing, based on the cadence, how often am I actually touching base with these clients, because this is all based on activities. So this is probably, what I would recommend. The best way to take advantage of the time that we have, everyone being at home, is to be able to plan out, make these lists, really understand what makes a customer or an account fall under a specific list, and then prepare and build activities and action plans for each account as you're moving forward. So at this point, I will pause and I'll open it up for any more questions. We have a couple here. Let me see what we have. So one that was kind of related to what somebody else asked today is, what type of activity types should people be using since they're now out in the field visiting people? And this is where you can really customize and make your own. We do have the default email and phone call activity types. So I would still recommend taking advantage of those if you are logging emails, or if you just are logging phone calls. Start using those activity types in Map My Customers so that you can get a real idea of how often you're actually touching base with the customers that you're reaching out to. What's the fastest way to log an activity from mobile? We did cover that a little bit. So that's going into the mobile app and just adding activity when you find the business or the company you want to make a note about, and then just saving it right away. All right, so I really hope this was helpful. This was a little, pretty in-depth as far as covering activities. But to be very honest, activities is probably also one of our most popular and powerful features that we have. So I'm glad we were able to do this and get, in depth about this today. Hopefully you learned a couple of things that can really help you as you're preparing and planning for the future. And that is it for this month's webinar. I really appreciate everyone's time this morning. Please continue to stay safe, practicing social distancing, making sure that we're helping out each other and staying, clear of this pandemic, so that we can all get out on the road and start selling and working with our clients as soon as possible. Thank you all.